Hi, Paul. How are you?
Hi, how are you doing, Christian?
Yeah, I'm good. Thank you very much. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Yeah, well, I was speaking with Bob Fletcher. He listens to the podcast, and he messaged me one day a list of names. But actually had you on the list anyway of names that I'd written down. So obviously I reached out, and here we are.
Yeah, thanks for reaching out. Yeah, I know Bob obviously from years ago. We both kind of work for the same company, so we know each other quite well. And to be honest with you, I work with his older brother now in
Oh,
BAE,
okay.
so we know each other quite well.
Okay, then. Well, obviously that's something we'll speak about a little bit later on. But can you just tell everybody how you got into welding and where you grew up?
So I kind of grew up in North Wales until my early teens. Came to Shropshire when I was 13. And my apprenticeship at 16, which meant I had to work away from home straight away at 16, which was quite a challenge. But yeah, I started with a company called Babcock when I was 16 years old in Tipton in Birmingham.
Yeah, well, that's quite a young age, 16, to especially to go and live away from home, away from your family.
Yeah, we were in a works hostel with like 40 other kids. We were it was a crazy time. When it was a little bit more, let's say, robust. If you played around a lot, you got through in the canal, that kind of stuff. It it was a bit rough and tumble, to be fair.
But you must have had some fun living there, 40 of you, especially, all young, same age.
Oh yeah, so it was first and second year apprentices. Yeah, it was a challenge. I shared a room with two other guys. There was three in our room. Luckily, one of the guys, Archie Bradbury, he's still a close friend now, but he was from South Wales, so he's down from Cardiff. His nan was very generous. She used to give him cake and biscuits, so kind of lived off Archie's nan and her generosity with sweets and biscuits and stuff. So
Okay, so
yeah,
obviously you had an apprenticeship there. So was that all based at Tipton to start with for a year, was it? Or
yeah, so the first 6 months was what they call basic training. So plumbing, electrical, bit of bench fitting, bit of pipe fitting, bit of machining, milling. So you got a really good broad range of skills. It was a NASEC apprentice through what was then the EITB, which has now morphed into the ECITB. Um, so you did 6 months basic training, and then after the 6 months you did your specialized training. So I did 1.5 years of specialist training in Babcock's welder training center with three instructors, and Clive Holland, who was an absolute saint. What a gentleman he was. Billy Townsend, who was the tyrant. He was a tough guy. Little short fella, but really really mean. And then there was Terry. Terry was the kind of black country, you know, real down and dirty welder. So yeah, 18 months with those three guys in the training center in Tipton.
so was that your choice to specialize in pipe welding, or was that just what everybody did?
Yeah, no, I wanted welding all the way. Some guys were disappointed because they were, kind of cajoled into rigging, lifting, pipe fitting, mechanical fitter. So there were a range of apprentices, but yeah, luckily I got welding, and I really from when I started welding right through up to today, I absolutely love welding.
And is there any specific reason? Was it anybody you knew who was a welder, family, or was it just something that you started welding and picked up?
A- Absolutely not. No, I've got no history of engineering in my family. Um, so, but I was always hands-on at school. The woodwork and metalwork, absolutely loved it. Um, and so yeah, where welding carries a certain, it's like kudos as well. It's everybody laughs about it, but everybody really wanted to be a welder. So yeah, I was fortunate. I was one of the few selected to go for welding.
Okay, then. So after your 2 years at Tipton, so basic training, and then where did you go from there? Was that sort of more site-based then?
Yeah, it was 2 more years on site and got transferred up to Sellafield in Cumbria. I was up there for quite some time. It seemed to rain every day in Cumbria. And the irony is I'm back in Cumbria now and it's still raining every day. But yeah, so I was up in Sellafield, then got transferred from Sellafield right the way down to the mouth of the Thames to a place called Isle of Grain. There was a power station down there, so I got transferred down there. Worked in Kent and Essex for quite some time then. So Tilbury, West Thurrock Power Station, Dungeness, all around that one area, which was fantastic. I uh, really learned my trade in the Isle of Grain, to be fair.
What sort of things were you welding then, Paul? Was it mostly pipe work or steel work or
All pipe work,
all
really.
pipe work?
Yeah. Started off when I first got on site doing simple things like boiler clips. Got put with a chap called his name was Terry Paternoster, but they called him Ugly. His nickname. Everybody in Essex and Kent has a nickname. This guy's name was
Mm.
Ugly, and of course his buddy, the welder he paired up with, they called him Tasty. So you got Tasty and Ugly. And I was called Ugly's child. It was that kind of thing. I
Yeah.
was their apprentice, so we were welding boiler tubes, top dead space welds. Difficult confined space work as well. Um, Really, yeah. With those two guys, they really looked after me. Really were proper welding craftsmen, proper mentors. Threw me in at the deep end, and yeah, I owe a lot of my ability to deal with certain situations down to those two guys, to be fair.
So how did you find the transition, from the, welding school in Tipton, nice and clean and everything there, to moving on to site? It's quite a big difference, isn't it?
Well, yeah, to be fair, I mean, in the welding school, you tend to remain quite clean. Thrown into a power station, you're covered in dust. It's boiling hot. It's 40 degrees in the top dead space, bottom dead space. It's really warm. You're sweating. The dust is sticking to you. It's and you're trying to make good welds as well. So yeah, it's a real challenge coming from the training school into environments like that. So yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think sometimes, people who don't work in the industry, I don't know, say a partner or your wife or whatever, wouldn't kind of understand the conditions you work in. It's quite hard to describe, when it's boiling hot or, in a boiler or whatever it is, and the conditions sometimes can just be insane, can't they?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, even I mean the reverse can be said about some of the petrochemical places you work at. If you're working on a refinery, you tend to be outside a lot,
Yeah.
and most of them are coastal. So you're always faced with these harsh, bitter cold winds, and driving rain. And so it goes from one extreme to another, from being, cold and wet to, boiling hot and wet from all of the sweat. So yeah, certainly not something I would want my partner to know about too much.
No, okay then. So obviously you said you started to build up and learn sort of what it's like to be on site. Was you kind of going to all different sites then with those through those 2 years?
Yeah, yeah. So after the second year, you spent a further 2 years on site. So I traveled wherever the work was, and Babcock's would move you around from outage to outage. I spent some time at Ratcliffe, Ferry Bridge, and Drax. So all of the main power stations. Did some nuclear work as well at Heysham, Hinckley, like I said, Dungeness earlier, and ended up on the last new build before Hinckley. Actually, we were down at Sizewell B, doing the new build at Sizewell in Suffolk. So that was an experience getting on a brand new construction site like that, and actually watching the dome get put on top of the reactor. That was quite something special. Yeah.
Yeah, so
So
kind of when you move into from shutdown to shutdown, you're obviously bumping into a lot of the same people and working with a lot of the same people.
yeah, yeah, you do. Yeah, it's a very close network, to be fair. And you know, I mentioned when we were talking earlier about Archie Bradbury, Andrew Bradbury. Um, I bumped into him like 20 years after we'd last met. And I'm forever bumping into people that, from the welding engineering, pipe fitting kind of industry, cross in New York City in America. And I'm sat waiting for the light to change to walk across the road. And this guy stood next to me. And I turned to him and I recognized him. He's one of my buddies. Yeah, we're literally stood on the same traffic light, waiting to
Yeah,
cross the same road in New York City. It's crazy, isn't it?
yes. It's obviously such a small world at times, isn't it?
Yeah, 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 it is. And I've been fortunate to travel around with welding, around the world as well. And it's amazing how small the welding community is that you bump into people that you've worked with on multiple contracts many, many years ago. So yeah, it's really, really quite strange phenomenon, really.
You know, the thing is as well, even if you haven't worked with someone, you've probably worked with someone, mutual friends or like you all know the same people, even if you haven't met each other before, don't you?
Yeah, that's true enough as well. And I work with a guy called Jim McElrath. He's a welding engineer, was a welding engineer for Alstom, and he joined Lincoln Electric, and he was working out in the Middle East. And I'm sat in a hotel in Dammam in Saudi Arabia, and he literally walked straight past me. It's
Yeah.
just a crazy situation when you meet people like that. Yeah.
Okay, so how long did you do at Babcock's in total then?
So stayed with Babcock's a couple of years. I was down at Sizewell B on the new build. Had one of the instructors come down to see me in Sizewell. Wanted me to come back to Tipton to do some training for what they now call World Skills, but back then it was called the Skills Olympics. Um, and of course it's all always about the money, right? So you're earning good money on site. They want you to go back to the training center. First question out my mouth was, oh, what's the money?
Yeah.
So they give me a good salary, so I agreed. I went back up to Tipton, did a few welding competitions in Tipton, local welding competitions, and then went in to represent Great Britain in, I think it was 91. Um,
That's the year I was
out.
born.
Right, okay, yeah, showing my age now, yeah. Yeah, getting on a bit now. But yeah, I went out to Amsterdam in 91 to represent Great Britain. That was fantastic. Great experience. Um, and with Babcock's, we were quite lucky because all of the competitors before me and quite a few after me, actually, the event happens every 2 years. They're all Babcock apprentices. So I don't know if you come across Jake Rambaldini yet?
He was the second ever podcast, Jake was, yeah.
Ah, right. Okay. Well, Jake obviously is a fantastic guy. So Jake, from my experience on World Skills, I did a lot of training with Jake in Tipton.
Oh, okay. Did you help to train Jake then?
Yeah, we
Yeah.
started off on some on aluminium, bit of pulse work with aluminium and some stainless steel. Yeah, so but he had a good team around him as well from World Skills themselves and I think from Lincoln and what have you. So yeah, I think Jake went out and I think he got a Medal of Honor. I think if I remember correctly.
Yeah, well, Jake listens to the podcast and I speak to him quite regular. We message now and again, but I think he had a bronze medal, I think, if I
Yeah,
remember.
he's a really good guy. Yeah, I mean, I thought I was good at welding, but Jake takes it to another level. To be fair to him, he's a really top guy.
I think he's really helpful in the welding community as well. I know a lot of people have said to me that he's helped them out if they've been struggling. with tips and tricks and anything else.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's one of the things about the welding industry. They like to help each other, They like to those guys that are struggling, those people that need a bit of help. It's as an apprentice, as a older guy, I feel part of my responsibility is to help the younger guys come through. So I'm sure Jake has the same ethos. He's a really good guy.
Yeah, okay then. So obviously you briefly mentioned where did you go after you started doing the world skills? What was next?
So I kind of left. I did the world skills. I left Babcock's. Wanted to settle down. I live in Telford in Shropshire now. Wanted to settle down in Shropshire. Took a job with a company called GKN, and they were manufacturing Range Rover chassis. In fact, that was the first opportunity of moving into supervision. I moved into supervision and later on into management with Babcock with GKN. So yeah, that was that's really where I kind of started to leave the hands-on welding aspect of things.
How
Did my
old are you
super.
then, Paul? How old are you then?
Oh, how old was I then? I don't know, maybe about 28, something like that, something 26, 28. Not entirely. My memory's all a mix with dates. Yeah, but started with GKN, did my supervisor's course with them, ended up being press shop manager, manufacturing press parts. So that really opened up my eyes for the automotive industry. Went on to do some Kaizen training, lean manufacturing and what have you with Toyota UK and Nissan UK, which again was really a fantastic experience. Yeah, so got a lot from that. Then moved into welding inspection, as you do. You kind of
Yep.
moved into the quality aspect. Then welder training. I moved into welder training as well. Ended up going back to Babcock's after a few years. So spent some time with Babcock's in Tipton, only this time teaching apprentices in the welding school.
Okay,
Did
then
that.
when you moved into teaching, did you have to go back to do any sort of other qualifications then?
Yeah, I mean, there was a couple of teacher training courses and, the assessor courses for assessing apprentices and what have you. Yeah, that was pretty good. But I mean, I think I'm quite a natural teacher, and as well, and as far as helping young guys and young girls actually develop their hands-on skills. So that was pretty good. I don't know if a lot of the welding fraternity will, of course, know Kevin Jones. Kevin Jones is the chief welding instructor in Tipton. He was a couple of years above me in my apprenticeship, and again, a bit of a mentor, to be fair. But I believe Kev is still there doing a fantastic job with the apprentices to this day.
Yeah, it must be so rewarding as well, to help teach the younger generation and to watch people learn and kind of pick up the skills because it's not an easy skill to pick up, is it? Especially when, you're working in heavy industry with, heavy butts and it's not an easy skill, is it?
It's not an easy skill, and it takes a lot of a huge amount of practice. And one of the things you need arc time. You've got to burn a lot of rods, a lot of wire. You've got to, you've literally got to have lots and lots of arc time. That's the only real way that you pick up the skill. And fortunately, Babcock's they had fairly deep pockets, so there was never a shortage of um, plate and pipe and weld consumables to practice. A lot of colleges I know struggle with the cost of materials in order to deliver the training that they need, and some of the kids don't get the arc time that they really require. But Babcock's was very good like that.
Okay, then. So you said you went back into Babcock's teaching. How long did you teach there at Tipton?
Couple of years, and then a guy called Martin Fletcher. We just spoke about him. He asked me to move over into the welding engineering department. So I moved over into the engineering department. It's quite daunting as a welder to sit next to a couple of engineers. I mean, on my right side, a lass called Dr. Claire Kimpton, who was a PhD, metallurgist, and on the right side, I had a guy called Dr. Sean Smith, um, another welding engineer, metallurgist, and there's little old welder me in the middle. And one of the fears was that I would be constantly asking these guys questions. But as it turned out, it was them asking me the questions, and that was quite, that was quite eye-opening. It gave me a chance to see welding from the procedural side. I started getting exposed to standards and specifications and um, all of the engineering side of things. That was pretty special. A little bit boring for a hands-on welder, but it was a valuable time in as far as experience.
Yeah, because you were probably looking at those guys thinking, well, they have all the qualifications, they know everything, and then they're looking at you and how much experience you have of, on the job experience or arc time or, however you
Yeah,
want to speak about it. That's something they couldn't understand, or
yeah.
have
Well,
never experienced.
that's it. When you've got an engineer who's an academic engineer, really fantastic at you know at the academic side, and he suggests to you, or are we going to weld this 20 mil thick plate with TIG? You're just going to laugh at him, right? Of course, you're not going to weld it full TIG. You might put the root in with TIG and a bit of stick and the rest flux core or even submerged arc. It's kind of passing on that um, weld productivity side as well to the engineers. So yeah, it was a very good sharing experience. I learned an awful lot about weld metallurgy from them and standard specifications application, and they learned a lot more practical welding bias from me, I think.
Yeah, so how long did you do that for?
Another couple of years, and I ended up moving into weld resource management, which was basically recruiting all of the welders for Babcocks. Obviously, there's peaks and troughs in the shutdown cycle. So every year we're busy trying to recruit 200 or 300 guys for 6, 8, 9 months of the year, and then we're releasing them after 6, 8, 9 months. That we're constantly recruiting and letting go, and trying to transfer these guys around the country so they got some continuity of work. But it was a challenge every year, so ended up doing that, sitting at my desk and getting slightly bored. I got to be honest. I'm much more of a hands-on guy than an office guy. And one day the phone rang. It's a guy called Mike Barmer, and he's out in Oman. And he come across my name on a couple of forums. I think there was a forum called UK Welder back in the day.
I can remember Googling things and looking on now when I was an apprentice. Yeah.
Yeah, well, my name was on there for, people had put my name on a few times, and he came across my name, and he called me up in my office and said, "Look, this is the situation. I'm out in the Middle East. We've got a contract to deliver welder training for Omanis. Will you come out and have a look?" And as I was kind of bored with the current role, I flew out to Oman for a few days to have a look at the setup that they had out there, with a view that if I liked it, I'd fly out to Oman. Ended up going for 10 years.
10 years. Okay, so you obviously liked something about the setup then.
well,
That's,
well, it's really funny as well because so I fly out and they've got these really lush offices, really, marble everywhere, glass everywhere, beautiful, beautiful offices. So I meet with Mike. Mike, here's another crazy story, right? When you bump into people, Mike lives 25 miles away from my house in Telford. So he lives in Shrewsbury.
yeah.
And this guy's out in the Middle East. I meet with Mike. Um, I ask if I can see the training center. So he puts me in a car with a driver, and we drive for about 30 minutes outside of Muscat and arrive in this place. And they show me the training center. It's a great big patch of sand. There's nothing there, just a massive piece of sand with a wall around it. Is it? That's where the training center is going. And I was kind of under the illusion that the training center was already built. So, I was one of the few people on this planet that actually I got the chance to design the training center. So I sat next to a guy from the Philippines in a design office, literally telling him where to draw lines and laying out the welder training center. Massive, massive facility, 100 welding bays,
Wow,
biggest,
100.
yeah, 100 welding bays, biggest facility in the Middle East at the time. I still think it is, with a company called Ray Skills. Um, and so sat with this designer for 2-3 weeks designing the place. Um, then knee deep, ankle deep in concrete as we were pouring the foundations. I worked with the contractors, putting up the steel work and supervising the build really, and the installation of all of the weld bays, extraction system. I had to recruit all of the welding instructors. So, in the Middle East, that's quite a challenge in itself. We had Jordanian guy, Mahmoud. We had Indian guys from India, from Bangladesh, Jordan, one Omani. We struggled to find any Omanis, but we managed to find one Omani instructor. 3 or 4 guys from the Philippines. So it was a real international effort. And as far as welding instructors, that was a challenge, just dealing with the you know interpersonal relationships with those guys. It's quite a challenge. But then having got these guys, we had to design curriculum. We had to purchase lathes, machines, band saws, weld machines, the whole works, just to get this facility in a position to start training. It was a huge challenge at the time.
So was that kind of, what was the facility like? Was it kind of no expense paid? Was it, whatever you want you can have, or was there kind of
Well,
restrictions and budgets or
yeah, no, actually, I mean, there was a budget. Of course, there was a budget, but it was a because the program was being sponsored by um, PDO. PDO is Petroleum Development Oman, which is like the state oil company of Oman. So it was a contract that was worth a lot of money, and we bought good equipment, really good equipment, 100 Lincoln um, Invatec TPs. So they were all kitted out identically. The filtration system, weld bays, all came from Kemper in Germany. Lathes, band saws, all top range stuff. So it was all. I mean, it was a fantastic facility. It really was. But it was challenging. It was a huge challenge to try and get it done in the time we had to do it, because we literally, from planning it to it operating, we had 18 months.
okay, so that's such a quick turnover then.
Yeah, it was huge. Yeah, it was massive.
So did you recruit any instructors from the UK, or were all of the instructors from abroad?
No, and well, I say no. We had the guy from the UK for a little while, um, and believe it or not, my son came over to help out as well. My son Kieran, he ended up doing his apprenticeship with Babcock's as well. He
Okay.
came over and gave me some support for a few months teaching TIG welding. But bottom line was the instructors from the UK quite expensive, whereas from the Asian continent they're just somewhat cheaper. Good welders though, very very good welders, especially the Filipino guys. They were terrific, and yeah, they taught me a fair bit. But that's not taking anything away from the Indian guys as well. Really really good welders, really good instructors.
So what was the quality of life like in Saudi Arabia? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
So this was in Oman, not in Saudi Arabia.
Sorry,
This
no,
was,
sorry, in Oman,
it's
yeah.
okay. No, and a lot of people don't even know where Oman is. Oman, where's Oman? But yeah, I mean, to be fair, it was fantastic. I absolutely love the place. It's my second home, and part of me still lives there now. It's a beautiful, beautiful place with beautiful people. Um, but in summer, it's screaming hot. It's like being in the top dead space again. It's 45, 50 degrees in the summer. Their winter time is like our summer. So, you've got anywhere between 18 and 25 degrees. It's just perfect weather. And the people are just phenomenal as well. So generous, so warm and welcoming. Yeah, really a special place.
Because you hear a lot of bad stories and a lot of bad press, but I went to Qatar just gone for the World Cup to watch Wales, and we had such a good time. We thought everybody was great. We stayed in Dubai, but flew over to Qatar for the football games, and we had a
Yeah.
great experience, a very, very good experience, in both Qatar and in Dubai as well. Really enjoyed.
Well, to be fair, I mean, everybody sees Islamic and Muslim culture. The only feed they get is really from our media, from our TV, and what they see. In the UK, they don't really have the opportunity to appreciate the real culture. And the, certainly in Oman, it's something special. These guys, you know, you get the chairman of the company praying next to, you know, the coffee shop seller. And prayer day is obviously on Friday. On Friday, they all pour out of the mosque, and the rich guys have got their, Bentleys and, big cars. But actually, every Friday, one of the things that really shocked me is the guys with the Bentleys would open their boot and they'd be handing out bags of groceries to all of the, the low level workers, the low paid guys, and it, they would invite you into their house. They would, it was just a such a warm place to be, not just for the heat, but
Not,
for the
yeah.
for the people as well. They're just wonderful, wonderful people, and absolutely the opposite of how um, Islam and Muslims are portrayed on our in our media. Yeah, just a great place to be.
Okay, then. So it was 18 months in development, and then can you tell us a little bit about, what happened once everything was up and running and you started recruiting apprentices?
Okay, so was a big challenge, right? So we had 400 apprentices to train, 400 welders.
400. Wow.
Yeah, 400. So we did them in two batches of 200. So we would have 100 guys starting at 6 o'clock in the morning till 2 o'clock in the afternoon. They would all leave, and we would have another 100 guys turning up at 2 o'clock in the afternoon till 10 o'clock at night. And I mean, it was just, you cannot imagine how much plate and pipe 100 apprentices will, devour
Yeah.
as they're training. The plate was just constantly coming in. The pipe was constantly getting cut, constantly on the prepping machine, on the lathes. These guys just ate welding consumables, pipe and plate. We just couldn't feed them fast enough. It was a huge, huge challenge, but we did okay. And they had to do 4 test pieces. Part of the contract with PDO, they had to be able to weld a 2-inch carbon steel pipe with full TIG, excuse me, a 6-inch carbon steel pipe, schedule 80, so like 11 mil thick with TIG and stick, with a basic 7018 rod. Then they had to weld 625 nickel alloy, which was full TIG at 2-inch again, and then a 6-inch nickel alloy 625 TIG and stick. Now, nickel alloy is challenging for the best of us, right? It's a real dirty material to weld. It's the weld pool's dirty, but taking an Omani guy that's never even heard of welding, taking them through carbon steel pipe and then into nickel alloy, what a challenge that was. But it was hugely rewarding. And tell you a little bit of a story about how hard it was to manage young Omani men at the beginning. So they have a saying out there, inshallah. Inshallah means like God willing.
Yeah.
So we started 6 o'clock in the morning, and these guys would turn up any time between 6 o'clock and 7 o'clock, up to an hour late. And you'd start off being nice, guys, I want to see you by 6 o'clock in the morning. And the answer would always be, inshallah. It was very much like that. So what we ended up doing, we basically gave them 1 minute, 6:01. If they weren't there by 6:01, we literally locked them out and deducted their salary,
Okay.
which had a real impact. So after like a couple of weeks of this, you could see the cars pulling in the car park and crowds of young Omani men running to get into the facility by 6 o'clock. It was just a huge change for them in as far as their discipline. But that kind of strong discipline really, well, not really works with Omani men, but really works with all men from all cultures, all societies, having a strong work ethic and discipline in as far as timekeeping and attendance. Yeah, it was good fun, to be fair.
Yeah, I think a lot of that comes from your background and how you grew up as well. Like, I know my dad sort of pushed it into me, hard working, be on time, always be on time. But, if you don't have that in your upbringing, then, it's not something that you're going to really be too bothered about, is it?
Well, I got to be honest. I felt a little bit like I became Billy Townsend. I mean, this guy was a tyrant, right? And I actually took a lot of that discipline that Billy had as when I was an apprentice, and I kind of used the best bits of it to try and get the best out of people. But yeah, the discipline, it's a good starting point in as far as when you move into your actual working career. So yeah, having good discipline, good behaviors, good time and attendance, that kind of stuff. Yeah, it's important.
Did you feel like you had to change, the way you were teaching or the way that you would do things in Oman, or was it no different to what you were doing in Tipton?
No, to be fair, I had a rigid approach to it in as far as, my standards are my standards, and I wasn't going to bend for, for the environment that I was in. You have to be quite strong in as far as sticking to your own expectations. And at first it's hard with young men, especially with young Omani men, because they're not kind of used to that regime. But you'd be surprised how they benefited from it, how they realized they benefited from it, and then the feedback. Even as recently as last week, these guys they stay in contact with me regularly. They've moved on to, much like yourself, you've moved on to welding inspection. We've from the 400 guys, we've probably got 50 or 60 welding inspectors out there now. They've really progressed in their career.
No, I think it's just kind of a natural progression, isn't it? Because obviously what a good weld is and what you expect, then it's kind of just learning the standards and learning, the C-SWIP and whatever route you go down.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There's a there's a few guys. So we for the first 200 guys that we did the training for, once they were finished, they went on to a site called Rabab Harweel, which is one of the mega projects for Oman PDO, for PDO in Oman. It's in the middle of the desert. And after we finished the training for the second 200 guys, they moved on to a second project called Yibal Khuf. And what we did once they finished their training, we actually hand selected welders from the first batch and started training them through a supervisor training course that we developed, and we had young Omanis with a couple of years welding experience that were supervising the next batch of Omani welders. And of course, these guys really excelled because I mean, we handpicked the very best,
Yeah.
and that really worked. And those guys have really gone on to so far have a fantastic career.
Yeah, so what was the kind of turnaround from the moment that the 200 came into the welding school and then they moved on to the project? What sort of timing was that?
So that was 2 years. They had 2 years
2 years.
in the training center. Yeah, I mean, it was incredibly tough, especially when you consider the heat. And then you have Ramadan. Ramadan is a complete month where these guys are not allowed to consume food and water between sunrise and sunset. So they're literally going the whole day without water. Can you imagine how tough it would be not to drink water in a desert country and be a welder? You know, that's
Okay.
just phenomenal, right?
I'm
So
thirsty now, just sitting here.
so I tell you a story, right? The first year I'm there with Ramadan, I think, I've got to show my support. I've got to have a go at this, right? So doing without food between daylight hours, that's dead easy. Anybody can do it. Doing without water, I had these huge headaches, huge migraines. I got to one point where I was actually feeling, like I wanted to be sick. I was that desperate for water. And that was only after like 3 days of trying this. How these guys do it, they're supernatural when it comes to depriving themselves of food and water during those daylight hours. But at the end of, of course, at the end of the day, at sunset, they get to break their fast. It's called
Yeah.
iftar.
Okay.
Okay, so these guys eat like they've never seen food before at iftar. So they consume and consume. The irony is that these guys tend to put on weight during Ramadan because, of course, they eat heavily late
Yeah.
at night and then they sleep. Yeah, so it's a real strange situation, but yeah, I don't recommend going without water um, in a desert environment and being a welder. No, not to anyone. Real, real character test that is.
Yeah, it definitely doesn't sound fun, does it?
No, no.
So in total, then you did 10 years there.
Yeah, I did 10 years. I left Ray Skills, and I joined PDO directly. They wanted me to move and supervise these welders on the two major projects in the desert. So I did that for a few years, 6, 8 years with PDO, which was again fantastic until COVID hit.
Right.
Um, COVID kind of knocked the wind out of everyone's sails, I guess. But yeah, I kind of was sat at home on standby for 7 months, I think, which was really, really challenging. And at the time, if you left the country, you couldn't come back. And I had my wife and daughter there. They'd shut the school, so I actually sent my wife and daughter back to the UK. And of course, they couldn't come back. I didn't see my family for 7 months.
Wow, that's difficult.
Oh, it was excruciating. Yeah, it was a huge challenge.
Obviously, yeah, that must have been extremely difficult because you can't go. Or is the reason why you stayed there because obviously you wanted to carry on working there
Well,
as
it was
well?
it,
Or
it was a case of working. Yeah, yeah. I love my work. I've always loved my work. Since 16, well, 13 really. I really enjoy the physical aspect of work. I really enjoy, you know, the craft itself. Um, and so work's really been important to me. And when you start something with 400 young Omanis, the last thing you want to see is the guy that's in charge of it just walk away from it. And I felt I owed it to them to try and make a success of it for them. But yeah, and it meant sacrificing 7 months with my certainly my youngest daughter and my wife.
Yeah, obviously looking back, it was such a strange time, COVID, wasn't it? Because I was in Australia during COVID, and everything was great, and I was kind of in a similar position to you, but it was kind of opposite for me. I had to come home because of a family emergency. Or my dad was very ill, and then I couldn't get back to Australia, and my partner was in Australia, and I think we did 6 or 7 months apart.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, it's a
such a
terrible time, wasn't it?
yeah,
Looking back, it was, it was all the kids that have struggled with their schooling, all of the people that have been separated from their families, people not able to attend, weddings and even, you know, deaths in the family. You look back and what a horrific time we all went through.
yeah. The only way I could get home was through Abu Dhabi, and then I had to pay, I think it was £1,800 to stay in a hotel for 10 days in London, just to come home to my own country. And I
Yeah,
didn't really want to come home. I was happy. I was living in Bondi. The last thing I wanted to do was come home. But it made me pay £1,800 just because I flew through Abu Dhabi. I think we just changed there. That was
yeah,
the only, yeah,
yeah, yeah.
mental
It
facts.
was balmy times. And of course, I mean, one of the good things about Oman is it's not a dry country, So there's the the bars and restaurants have alcohol. You can't go to a bar and restaurant, but you can get home deliveries, and they have a system of buying a alcohol license.
Um,
So if you buy a license for like 100 rial, which is like 200 quid, you're then allowed to spend 200 quid a month on alcohol.
Okay.
So as long as you've got your license, there are these secret little off licenses. You can get your wine and your beer and what have you quite easily in Oman. But yeah, it wasn't very good being sat at home for 7 months with a ready supply of alcohol and food. It wasn't. I put a few pounds on, let's say.
Yeah, how did that sort of affect you, your mental health then? Was it like a really struggle for 7 months, or did you just ate and drank for 7 months?
Ate, drank, and I mean, at 54 now, this was a couple of years ago now, but I got rather good at Xbox with Call of Duty
Okay. Yeah.
because
Wasn't
it,
expecting that.
yeah. I've got twin boys, Kieran and Josh. They're 27 now. But during COVID, the only way I could really communicate to them was on the headsets through Call of Duty. So
Yeah.
yeah, it was a good way to kind of maintain the link with my two boys.
Doesn't sound like a typical contract welder anyway, does it? I think. What do you think? What
No,
do you think some of the guys would have said if they known you were doing that?
yeah, it became quite addictive to be fair because
Yeah.
I mean I like to read. I read loads of books, but you know, apart from reading, the only thing I had to do in the villa was Xbox. So yeah, I managed to. In fact, listen to this. There was a WhatsApp guy, and you just WhatsApp the guy. I want an Xbox, a controller, and a game, and like 2 hours later, it's delivered to your house. Their
Yeah.
their their home shopping ability for anything, for iPhones or whatever out there, is just fantastic. So yeah, I had it delivered to the house, set it up, and me and my boys stayed in touch playing Xbox.
Great. Okay then. So obviously, to make the decision to come home must have been difficult, but can you tell us a little bit about
Yeah.
that?
Okay, so my father-in-law's got dementia, so he's not so well, and you know, uh, I can joke about the human aspect, and I joke about it with my wife, but he moved in with us a few years back with the idea that we thought he might live for 1 year. Okay, he's been now living with us like 17 years.
Well,
Yeah, so it's been a long process, but he's gradually got worse. I wouldn't say he's got that much longer to go. So with that in mind, and with my youngest daughter starting at Glasgow University last year, we took the decision to, it's time to come home. We got 7 grandkids. My wife and I have got 7 grandchildren, so it's also a case of spending time with them where we can as well. So the decision was to come home. We wrapped up all of our belongings, put them in a shipping container, and dispatched them from Oman to the UK. We fetched 3 cats with us as well, believe it or not, 3 adopted cats.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that cost like 600 quid a cat just to get back into the UK. It must be absolutely mad, but it was still cheaper flying the cats back to the UK than putting up with the abuse I would have got from my youngest daughter if we'd left them behind. So yeah, so we moved back to the UK. I guess then it was kind of like I'll settle down locally and just find something local. But that's when Martin Fletcher, an old colleague from Babcock, who's a really great guy, he gave me a call and said, Paul, I could kind of do with your help up at BAE in Barrow in Furness on the nuclear submarines up there that they're building. We've got some challenges. How do you fancy coming up and having a look and trying to help out? So I've been up there for the last, 6-7 months, I guess, traveling up there 4 days a week and back home in Shropshire 3 days a week. So yeah, that's how we ended up coming home. So I've settled into Barrow in Furness on a temporary contract at the moment, having a look, see if I can help them out with their welding issues and improvements and developments, which is really good. Working with a great team up there, really young team, young bunch of welders. I think 70 or 80% of them have got less than 6 years welding experience. There's a few older guys up there, but not so many now. A lot of the older guys have left the industry and promoted into supervisors and quality and safety, and there's not a lot of old timers left still doing the trade. So they're all young guys up there. Lots of challenges with them, but I'm absolutely loving being part of that team, to be fair.
Yeah, obviously, it's quite well documented. There's, a skill shortage in the UK at the moment. I think, there's a big gap between, as you said, some of the old timers and obviously a lot of the younger generation that's coming through now.
Yeah. There seems to be large chunks of time where companies just didn't take on apprentices. So there's, if a company is taking on 20 apprentices every year, and then you miss 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years of that's a huge gap, right? And that eventually filters through that all of a sudden you've got no guys in the shop that have got years and years of experience. And BAE, along with my boss Martin Fletcher, we're trying to address those kind of issues. This year they'll be taking on in excess of 40 welding apprentices between structural welders and pipe welders. Next year that number will increase again. So yeah, there's some huge challenges in as far as trying to fill those gaps. But yeah, it's good to work with a good team up there that are able to do that, to be fair.
Yeah, so does BAE have like a link up with the local college or?
Well, they do. There's Barrow in Furness College, so they're linked up with that, and they're heavily, as the major employer in the area, they support their local community a huge amount. And they've got what they call the SASC Submarine Academy. It's basically a training facility. I mean, this place is the state of the art. It's a fantastic facility. Great welding setup, great set of instructors, great programs for developing young welders and pipe fitters and electricians and all of the other trades that they require. So for Barrow, the future is quite bright, and for a young apprentice that wants to come into, what we would call the black trades, right? It's quite bright, and as far as lots of opportunities up there for them. So yeah, it's looking good up there, to be fair.
Yeah, do you think that schools do enough to kind of promote apprenticeships?
Well, no, they don't really.
Mm,
And you know, in my day, we had metalwork and woodwork in school, and we had some vocational activities in school that just aren't there anymore. Those activities stopped and kind of moved into college. And so as a young guy, I don't know, maybe from about 12 years old, I was doing woodwork and metalwork. And I don't think kids get the opportunity in school for doing that anymore. And they might get an opportunity at 16, 17 when they move into college. And one of the things I have a real problem with at the moment in as far as apprenticeships is this requirement to um, have grade A to C
yeah.
in maths and English. I was having a discussion with a colleague in BAE. He's a MSc engineer, welding engineer, sits next to me, and we both were ex-welders, and neither of us would get on an apprenticeship program now because we didn't have that level of maths and English that they require nowadays. And that is quite sad because it isolates a whole bunch of young men and women and prevents them coming into those vocational areas. And they're exactly the type of people that we should be putting into vocational areas. So, my boss and a few others, we're trying to address this at the moment at a fairly high level, trying to give these people I believe wholeheartedly every kid leaving school should be going into higher education or into an apprentice, every single one of them. Um, and I'd love to see the day where that actually happens.
Yeah, look, the thing is, not everybody's suited to learning at 16 or 15. I certainly wasn't. I did have A to C's at maths and English, but, university wouldn't have suited my skill set at all. And I was never really a hands-on person. But then when I actually got into college and started welding, I picked it up and I really enjoyed it. But it's not something that I ever knew about. It's not something that was ever pushed on to me. I kind of fell into it, if anything, through the ECITB. I know you mentioned the CITB earlier.
Yeah.
But nothing I was ever told about. And if I hadn't kind of fallen into it, I never would have moved into the industry.
Yeah, yeah, and that's kind of like my colleague. His name's Mike, and myself. I didn't go to university till I was 30 years old. And you know, academia comes into people's lives at different levels, and setting these tough maths and English levels at such a young age. Mike wouldn't be doing his wouldn't have completed his MSc in welding engineering, and I wouldn't be where I am today if we hadn't got onto that apprenticeship. And to take that away from young men and young women nowadays, I think it's sacrilege. I really think skills ministers and what have you really ought to look at what they're trying to do, because people do benefit from getting a skill and then going back into education to get a career. Because there's two types of school leavers, right? There's ones that have done really well at school and they're looking for a career, and there are those that are at school that have not done so well that need a job. And an apprenticeship is a job, but it has the ability to morph into a career. And that's what we should be offering these young men and women.
Yeah, exactly. Well, look, as you said yourself, welding can take you all over the world. So, you're not just confined to working in a fab shop somewhere. You can work wherever you want because those skills are transferable, aren't they?
Exactly. I mean, again, there are many times where my salary has been in excess of a consultant doctor. I'm just a welder. I've been fortunate to earn an awful lot of money as a welder, and there are a lot of welders out there that earn a lot of money. And it goes to show the value of an apprenticeship program. Good skills, someone that's a real craftsman can really, really earn good money if they want to as well.
because skills and the skills and the trades do have a bad name. It's kind of a lot of the reason why I started the podcast. People say, oh well, there's no money in welding anymore. Well, I've certainly never felt like I've not earned money. And people say, oh well, £12 an hour. Like if you don't take those jobs, then no one's going to fill those jobs. you know
Yeah, yeah, no, that's true.
I don't
And
understand that at all.
employers are always trying to, pay as minimal as they can. And but it's a seller's market today. Welding skills are in high demand, and salaries you can get significant. I mean, I've seen salaries for 9.50 an hour as a welder, and and it chokes me to see it because it's like minimum wage. It's like a few pence above minimum wage. And then I've seen, salaries at 37, 38, 40, 45, 60 pound an hour. And that's more akin to a craftsman's wage in my view. Someone that can earn when they're working, anywhere between 400 and 600,000 pound a day, whatever it might be. That's a real good salary for a craftsman.
Yeah, well, look, even kind of workshops are paying travel and digs now, whereas you wouldn't have had that 5, 6 years ago. Not a hope in hell, would you? But now,
Yeah.
people can't get the men.
No, no, it's true. And when we look at when we look to the future, and you mentioned that you were down at Hinkley C, right?
Well, I
Uh,
was working for Framatome, so it was in Bristol, so we were doing the
yeah.
work for Hinkley. Yeah,
But when you take a project like Hinkley C, and possibly Sizewell C, and possible nuclear installations around the UK, when you look at the offshore wind industry, and when you look at even Barrow in Furnace, the industry requirements for welders is huge nowadays, and it offers a great opportunity for young men and women to come into and earn, a very, very good living.
yeah. Well, look, nuclear should take us through for the next, at least 20, 30 years. The building of those, really, shouldn't they?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I was on new build at Sizewell B in '91.
Yeah.
And that was the last nuclear new build. And here we are talking about Hinkley C after all of this time. And one of the errors of our successive governments is not to keep, you know, backfilling those that kind of industry with the skills it requires.
Okay, then, Paul. So, a question for you, how do you think the industry has changed, over the last 30, 40 years?
Oh, I mean, some of the things I'm seeing nowadays. I was having a look at laser welding just a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
Just blows my mind. Just absolutely phenomenal. And some of these cobot systems that they're fetching in, some of the almost like AI systems for welding that they're fetching in, are just truly phenomenal. Um, but again, ultimately, it relies that if you consider the training that a welder today receives, it's not a lot different than I received. And that tells me that kind of skill, that trade, is paramount to the success of industry. And yes, technology is coming that the future generations are going to have to be au fait with. But if you can use an iPad, you can teach these things to weld, and it's pretty amazing stuff. So yeah, it's going nowhere but a good place, to be fair.
Yeah, look, even with the use of cobots or whatever that is, you're still going to need you know humans to operate them as well, aren't you? So it's not
Yeah,
like it's going to take over jobs. Obviously, it's going to make jobs quicker, but there's
yeah.
still going to have to be human input, whatever happens, isn't there?
Absolutely. I tell you something else that impresses me nowadays, and it's a health and safety thing for me as well. When I started my apprenticeship, you got a chroma hat, and you had a welding screen, and that was your lot. You got your overalls, your boots, and your gloves. Nowadays, all these guys are wearing air-fed, battery-powered reactor light masks, and you know, health, not just safety, but health has become a priority, making sure that welders aren't exposed to fume and radiation and contamination. These advancements in the types of PPE that are available to welders nowadays, that's truly phenomenal. That'll make a huge difference to the health and well-being of welders for the next generations to come. So it's great to see that kind of stuff actually in industry now. And the HSC have done a great job of enforcement with regards to welding fume and dust and those kind of exposures to those hazardous materials that we in the past would have not blinked an eye at.
Yeah, I definitely think, passing a law to make those mandatory was the best thing possible really for welders because I actually bought one before the law came in because I just remember coughing and spluttering. Um, but for everybody to have access to that, whether you can afford it or not, or for the company to have to provide that is a brilliant thing, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and and I guess if you learn to weld at my age, everybody knows the smell of a rutile electrode and
Yeah,
all of the black rubbish that you have in your nostrils at the end of a hard day, and we laugh about it now, but you look back at it and you were breathing in all kinds of rubbish
yeah,
and to know now that the kids that are going through training and even those welders that are in the trade nowadays, they're that much more safer, that much more protected. That's a great thing in as far as technology development.
yeah. No, it's brilliant.
I
Okay,
remember
then,
first
Paul.
seeing
Oh, go on.
I remember first seeing my first ever reactor like, and I was like blown away. This thing changes when you strike up. Seriously? Yeah, it was just like wow. But now they're rolled out and everybody's got one.
Yeah, obviously the advancement in screens and everything is incredible, especially from even from when I've started. So, from when you've started, it must be obviously a lot
Yeah,
more.
I was lucky to have a flip front.
Yeah,
Normally it was a nodding neck. That
nod
was
the
the
head,
one.
yeah.
Yeah, that was it. Yeah. Good.
Okay then, Paul. So, what's next for you? Any plans? Anything for the future?
Um, do you know what? I'm not entirely sure. I'm going to carry on with BAE for the short term, see where BAE takes me, see what kind of, because I like challenge, I like problems. I don't like an easy life. I like difficult problems to solve. If things become too comfortable, I become very bored, and then I get into mischief. So, so
Like a
yeah,
typical welder, yeah.
yeah. So yeah, I'm working with like I said, working with a great team at BAE, a young team. I've been asked to look at developing welder supervisor um, programs to enhance the training that they get to for the next generation. So that's quite challenging. Looking forward to that. Um, I guess in my personal life, it's all about my grandchildren now. They're just having seven of them. They're just truly fantastic. Yeah. So yeah, the next challenge is really, I guess, trying to strike a balance finally between work and family life, and not giving all of my time and effort to work.
Yeah, I suppose that's the hardest part about working away from home or working abroad or whatever is finding that correct balance and making sure that you spend enough time sort of downtime with family and grandkids and kids, whatever else.
Yeah, we're all guilty of it. We all give too much time to work, and that's even worse when you absolutely love your work, which, to be fair, most of my life I've really enjoyed my work. So I've been very, very lucky, and as a career, it's been a wonderful ride so far.
Yeah. Okay then. So if you had to give a piece of advice to somebody coming into the industry now, what would that be?
As a young 16-year-old or 18-year-old or 20-year-old, or nowadays there is no age limit on an apprenticeship, but if you're going to come into a skill craft like welding, then just dedicate your time to learning the craft. Don't worry about the money. Don't worry about earning pittance and rubbish pay. Just work incredibly hard at learning the skill. Once you've learned the skill, the money will follow. If you're good at a trade, if you have the capability of really delivering in your trade area, the money will literally fall in your lap. People will be fighting to get hold of you. So my advice would be to work incredibly hard for the first 4 to 6 years of your career and build a strong foundation and skill level, and money will follow.
Good. Yeah, great. There's one more question that I ask each of my guests to come on. Is there one funny story you can tell me from the industry or something that comes to mind?
Yeah, one funny story. Okay, on a
Or you can
particular
tell us
site.
a few funny stories if you want, whatever,
Oh,
whatever
okay,
works for
on
you.
a particular site, we have to go into a clean nuclear environment, right?
Yep.
So it means getting stripped naked, and you end up having to put these white Y front pants on, proper old
Yep.
man pants,
Yep.
white vest, orange coveralls, socks, covers, and you're going into a nuclear environment, right? You get a little throat mic, you get a throat mic and a air-fed hood, and you climb into the boiler, the reactor unit, the heat exchange unit, and you're suited and booted, right? When you come out of these environments, you have to be stripped by the guys waiting outside for you. They have to undress you. So
Okay.
of course uh, it's a story that's conveyed to me, and I worked with a guy called Mad Dog, right? That was his nickname. He's a welder, and the story as it's conveyed is on over the mic, over the earphones. Guys, I'm in trouble. And it's like, what? Said, I've just farted and I followed through. Oh no! It's like, oh seriously, Mad Dog, what have you done? So he's literally suited and booted. He's got to crawl down these tiny ladders
Oh,
through these tiny holes, and he's got to get outside of the unit. And these two poor guys outside
oh.
have got to strip him down, and they have to strip him naked, and he's just like covered in himself. That's, I mean, it's funny looking back at the moment, but yeah, I couldn't believe it. But yeah, so definitely, if you're going into those kind of environments, be careful what you eat the night before.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
brilliant.
so that would be my funny story, because it just tickles me. I put myself in the in the minds of these two guys having to strip
Oh.
Mad Dog down. It's just
Do you have anything from Oman? Any funny stories from there? Or
from Oman. Um, I'm sure there are loads of funny stories. Oh, yes, I do actually. Listen to this, right? So I'm in the desert, right? And I wake up really early. I'm always waking up early, and work starts at 6 o'clock in the morning. I'm awake at 4 o'clock. So I decide to go for a walk, pitch black, in the middle of the desert up to the site. So I get up to the site. I leave 4 o'clock. I get up to the site about 10 to 5, right? Still dark. So I decide to lay down at the gate because the gate's locked, right? So I decide to lay down at the gate and go to sleep. So I fall asleep, and the next minute, all I can hear is like,
oh my God.
yeah. So I jump. I mean, I jump out my skin. It's only a desert fox,
Oh my
literally
God.
smelling me. This beautiful desert fox. He scares me. I scare it. He runs a mile. Yeah, it was just one of those weird desert stories. Yeah. So I had a desert fox looking to take a bite
Sniffing
out of me,
around there, yeah.
taking a bite out of me as I slept. Yeah. So yeah,
Hmm.
but yeah, good story, good memory.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. Yeah, well, thank you very much for speaking to me today, Paul. It's been great to chat to you.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, it's been a pleasure meeting you, and the chat earlier is good. Find out a little bit about yourself as well.
Yeah, exactly. Is there anybody, who you would recommend that I reach out to or speak to? Anybody you think would have some good stories?
Yeah, do you know what? There's so many, but
Yeah,
bear in mind I spent 10 years on Oman. I'd really like you to reach out to a guy called Hussein Al Shahumi.
okay.
He's on LinkedIn. He works for
Yeah,
a company called OQ now. Great young guy, really, really talented, great welder that's managed to progress and start his career. Um, but based on the fact that I spent 10 years in Oman, it might be good if you got a guest,
yeah, of course.
that lived the other side of the story. So yeah, um, Hussein Al Shahumi um, would be a good choice. To be fair,
Yeah. Okay,
great
no,
young
that's
man,
great.
great young
Yeah.
man.
Okay, well, thanks for speaking and thanks for taking the time. And I look forward to speaking to you soon.
Fantastic. Thank you, Chris.
Yeah. Cheers, Paul. Thank you.
Cheers.
Take this time to thank anyone who's been watching, listening, or following along with the podcast on any of the social media platforms or on LinkedIn. Um, it's been a really rewarding process, and I've enjoyed making them. But this is going to be the final episode of season one. But hopefully in a couple of months, we'll pick back up. And if anyone has anything they would like to comment, then please leave some comments in the comment section on YouTube or comment on any of the posts. And if there's anyone that you think you'd like to see or hear on the podcast, then please feel free to drop a few names below. And then hopefully, we can look at start recording again within the next few months. Thank you very much for everything. Cheers.